Hi everybody, it's Professor Parish, and this is a special mid-semester video. I am going to be posting our Week 9 video very soon, but I wanted to create this video specifically to go over MLA. I know that when it comes to citations, we are coming into this class from a lot of different backgrounds. Some of you have just taken English 121 last semester, so you are probably familiar with citations, and others you may not have used citations for 10 years. Or you may not have realized how much MLA has changed over the past several years, and so you're coming into this relatively fresh. The reason why I want to go over MLA with you all so heavily in English 122 is because for most of you, this is probably the last English class you'll ever take. So if you take other classes beyond this, you will likely have to use MLA or some form of citation in the future. So my goal is that you are prepared to use citation formatting, that you know how to do it, and that you are proficient in it, because I don't think there's a way to master it. It's always going to keep changing and updating, but practice makes perfect with MLA. The more you cite, the easier it will get for you, and the more proficient you will be in it. So with that being said, I'm going to go over MLA today with you all, how to do a works cited page, how to do in-text citations. If you think you know how to do it, please watch this video anyway, because you may find out some other things about our class and about citation and finding sources in general. So this presentation that I'm going to go over is in our resources and handouts guide. It has been listed since week 1. I put it there in week 1 so it's easy to find and that it's always there for you. I choose to make this video around week 8, between weeks 8 and 9, because at this point in the class we're just now starting to really dive into MLA. And you will notice that MLA becomes more and more prevalent the more this class goes on. So I figure now is the time we need to delve back into MLA and talk about it. So I've got our presentation pulled up here. All right, move myself around. The first couple slides here are going to be mainly about researching and finding credible research. So when we get to paper 4, these couple of slides that we start out with are going to be very, very important. So feel free to come back through this presentation when we get to paper 4 and jot back through these first couple of slides. But I'm going to go past them fairly quickly to get to the good stuff, to get to the MLA. Mainly when you're researching, use credible sources, make sure they're timely. We'll talk more about that. Bias is a big issue with citations. Ideally, you want to pick a source that doesn't have any bias, something that's objective or factual, like a report or statistics, but that doesn't always happen. So if it does happen where you have to use a source or that you want to use a source that does have some clear bias in it, you can do that as long as you are transparent with your audience and you make them understand that, yes, this is a biased source, but I need to use it for X, Y, and Z reasoning. As long as you're not tricking your audience, as long as you're being clear with them and not trying to deceive them, then I think that it's acceptable to use a source that has an argumentative value to it, as long as you're upfront with your audience. So, for example, I could set my paper up like this. Although Jernigan's writing has been labeled as, quote, highly conservative, end quote, by the New York Times, I feel he still makes a valid point about immigration reform and ones that needs to be explored further. So you can see there, I acknowledged the bias, but I established why I was using it in my paper, so your audience is clear on your reasoning. And you'll also notice that I've included an in-text citation here to show where my research has come from. Where is my quote from? So I can list that here. And we'll talk more about in-text citations very soon. Cite credibility. I always, I feel like we tell students this in high school, but I'm going to emphasize the reasoning why. Do not use Wikipedia. I know that it seems almost cliche at this point. You're like, I know, my teachers have all told me not to use Wikipedia. There is a reason. Wikipedia, ask.com, WikiHow, about.com, do not use any site that is editable, that people can create an account and edit that information, because it makes it extremely unclear whether the information you receive from these sites is factual or not. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, they have moderators now that get on Wikipedia and make sure everything is kosher and factual. Not necessarily. And I'm going to tell you a story that I tell every single one of my students every semester about Wikipedia and why I do not consider it a credible source. When I was in college, I had a fellow classmate. His name was Jairus Bellamy. We went to Illinois State together after we left SIC. And my junior year of college, we had this big discussion about Wikipedia in my English class and whether or not it was a credible source. And Jairus decided to prove the point that it was not credible by going into a Wikipedia article and editing it. So he chose Frank Sinatra, who is a singer from the 50s, if you're not familiar. He went to Frank Sinatra's Wikipedia page, clicked edit, and this was back before you had to create an account to get onto Wikipedia and edit things, but he just edited the document and selected to place himself as Frank Sinatra's spiritual advisor. So he labeled Jairus Bellamy as Frank Sinatra's spiritual advisor and put in the Wikipedia article that he had gave Frank Sinatra's eulogy. He'd done all of this hokum stuff that was not true. So fast forward 3 months, and the Wikipedia moderators finally noticed that someone had edited Frank Sinatra's page. They saw the stuff that Jairus put in, and they took it out. So if you go to Wikipedia's page, you won't find Jairus Bellamy in the article anymore. However, by the time that this had all happened, we looked it up, and there are several YouTube video arguments, there are several websites, there are other articles that cite Jairus Bellamy as Frank Sinatra's spiritual advisor. You can look it up. You can look it up online. You can look up just Jairus Bellamy. If you're having trouble finding it, I will send you all an article. But it's really interesting. Hold on just a second. Okay, I'm back. Had to answer a phone call. So by the time that Wikipedia had corrected it, he had already basically, had his false information spread across the internet. And that's just how fast the trajectory of false information can go. And we see this every day. You see like a Facebook post that's like been shared over and over again, and you think to yourself, did anybody ever research to find out if this information is factual or if somebody just made it up and put it on a picture and said it was real? Or there's those fake internet quotes where everybody's like saying it's from Albert Einstein, but it's clearly not. I mean, there's lots of examples. But the idea is that you have to know if that source is credible or not. And I don't find Wikipedia to be credible at all for that obvious reason. But if you're a wiki junkie and you really like going to wiki sites to start your research, what I would recommend doing is, if you're dead set on using Wikipedia, don't cite Wikipedia. Just scroll down to the bottom of the page and see the sources that Wikipedia cites, and cite those instead. Because that's going to give you a lot more factual information than the actual Wikipedia site itself. Needless to say, if you cite Wikipedia in any of your papers, I'm going to know you didn't watch this video, and I'm going to reference that you watch it. I'm not going to be happy. All right, site credibility. I'll talk about that a little further. They're basically, I've got here a hierarchy of sites in order from least credible to most credible. .com or .net. .com just stands for commercial. Anybody can buy a .com site, so be careful of those. Now, obviously, on one hand, hospitals and a lot of organizations use .com sites because they're cheap. Obviously, a hospital is going to be factual and a credible source of information. So you just have to use your best judgment on those sites. Organizations have to be purchased by an organization, so there's a little bit more scrutiny there on who gets to own those web domains. But again, I've seen BigfootAnonymous.org. You've got to use your best judgment when you're determining whether or not they're credible. .edu and .govs, I'm not going to question the credibility of those sites because I know that they're going to be factual. Now, .gov sites are going to be incredibly dry because they're probably going to just be factual information, and .edus are just education sites. So you may find some information from a professor at a college or things like that to back up your paper. But long story short, just be careful on the sites that you use. All right. And then I've got some tips here on how to choose whether a site looks credible or not. Does it have an author? Is there a lot of stuff being advertised on that site? Does it look professional? You know, just kind of using your own common sense judgment to see whether or not that site works or not. Facts versus personal testimonies. Facts are objective, they're proven, they have research behind them, and then personal testimonies are subjective. They're just someone's account of events. And you kind of have to put that out there that they're just accounts. They're not, you know, factual information. All right, and finally, timeliness. Kairos is what it's called in Greek terms, but usually you want to try to get information that's younger than 5 years. So believe it or not, anything that's earlier than 2010 is probably not going to be very factual or up to date. It's crazy, right? Now, obviously, there's some exceptions. If you're, you know, you need some background information, some primary research, that stuff can be older. But for your up-to-date research, you want it to be within the last 5 years published so that it's up to date. All right. So here we get into MLA. When you think about it, though, there's really only things to cite. There's really only 2 parts to look at, and one is just your works cited page, which we always see at the end of the paper, and the other is what we call in-text citations. And I'm going to go over in-text citations first. These are when you reference something within the essay itself. So with in-text citations, these are just bits of information that are put in parentheses that show the source of your paper as you read. And the whole idea behind this is that as your audience is reading, if they get to a quotation they like or a source's reference that they really want to read more about, they can kind of see as they go along what that source is, and then at the end of the paper, they can look it up themselves. So, for example, I have Professor Billingsley stated the importance of, quote, completing all the tasks of the project on time, end quote. And I have my little in-text citation here, which is ILSU, which is Illinois State's website. And that shows me, the reader, okay, they got this quotation from Illinois State's website. I'll go look that up later. That's the idea behind it. Anytime that you use a source in your paper, you need to place an in-text citation after that, or at least at the end of the paragraph. At least at the end of the paragraph, you're using a source, you need to reference what that source is. The good thing is, in-text citations are easy. A lot of people think that they're hard. They are not. You really only have a hierarchy. You've got like 3 options for web sources and 3 options for print sources, and that's it. That's all you have to choose from. So you just have to go through the hierarchy of what option do I always choose first? If that doesn't work, what's my B option? If B option doesn't work, what's my C option? And that's pretty much it. So first, with print sources, naturally what you want to do is put the author's last name, in this case it would be Billingsley, and the page number, 14 in this case, and that's your in-text citation. So if your source has an author, but you don't state it in the paper itself, you put the last name and the page number as the in-text citation. So I've got here, pandas are the cutest animals. And then in parentheses, I have Billingsley 14 as my in-text citation. That's it. That's all you have to have. Now below, if your source doesn't have an author, like if you cite from a hospital website, or if you already stated the author in the quotation itself, then all you do is put the title of the book and the page number. So I have here, Billingsley pointed out, pandas are the cutest animals. Well, I've already stated Billingsley here, so instead of putting his name again, I'm going to put Cute 101, page 14. The title of the book, the page number. And that's it. You really have those 2 options for your in-text citations for print sources. That's it. That's all you have to worry about. Pretty easy, right? Now with digital sources, your in-text citations in the paper, you have only 2 options, A and B. Option 1 is just the author's last name. Now, you'll note that there are no page numbers in these examples. That's because digital sources do not have page numbers. A website doesn't have a page number, so you don't have to include it. So you can just have Billingsley here, or if Billingsley is already in the sentence, you just put the website title, nytimes.com. And you'll notice here you do not need a www or anything after nytimes.com. It's just the basic web URL, the basic website, or the author's last name. So to review, in-text citations, you either have, with print sources, you have the author's last name and page number, or you have the book title and page number. Or if it's a digital source, you either have the author's last name or the website. That's it. That's in-text citations in a nutshell. It's all you have to have. It's pretty easy once you actually get down thinking about it. Now, what we normally think of with citations is the works cited page. And so that's the last page of your paper. You'll title it Works Cited page. And then you will list your sources in alphabetical order, starting with the author's last name or the very first letter of the citation itself. Because again, some of your sources may not have authors, so you just start with the first letter of the title in the Works Cited page. Now, this page is probably something most of you have wanted to reference. I have on either side of me. This shows you which items you should italicize or which you should put in quotation marks. So if it's a big text, you usually put those in italics. So entire books, entire television shows, entire journals, entire web URLs, or entire music albums, those are all italicized. But if it's a part of a whole, like a chapter of a book, or a poem of an anthology, or a song of an album, or an episode of a TV show, if it's one small part of a big whole, then you put it in quotation marks. So hopefully this, if I've been noting on your discussion forum posts, or your reading responses, or any of your assignments that you need to italicize or put things in quotation marks, this slide right here will encompass what you need to do. Now, when MLA started out, all we were doing was citing books, so it was pretty easy. And this is the basic formula for MLA citation. You'll notice that every formula we use for MLA starts with this formula and then just expands upon it. So you start out, you always do the author's last name, a comma, their first name, the title of the work. Sometimes it's in quotation marks, sometimes it's italicized. It depends on the work. The publisher and the date. That's all you need. That's absolutely it for a book. So you'll notice here, I have, for my example of my book in MLA, I have Smith, comma, John. So John Smith is my author. I have Smith, comma, John. A Day to Remember is in italics because it's my book title. My publisher is Penguin Press. My year published is 2012. That's all I need. It used to be that you had to put the city of publication. You used to have to put print at the end of it. Since MLA has updated, you don't have to do that anymore. Now, if you include the city of publication and the word print on accident, just out of habit, I'm not going to count off on it because I think that that's okay. But if you forget it, it's okay because we don't require it anymore. You just have to have the title, the publisher, and the date. That's all you need. And the reason for that is that it's a lot easier to look up books now. So if you have the title, the publisher, and the date, you can probably find that book in a search engine and not have any trouble. Web pages or web articles, these are fairly easy as well. It's the same thing, author last name, comma, first name. The title of the web page or the title of the web article is in quotation marks because it's a piece of a website. It's a small part of a bigger whole. Then you have your web URL in italics, the web publisher, the date published, and then a link to the website. So you'll notice you don't have to state the medium here anymore either. So my example here, I have Tanya Murphy. So I have Murphy, comma, Tanya. The title of my article is Immigration Reform on the Forefront. So I have that in quotation marks. Now here's where it gets a little confusing for students, and I'll explain why. You'll notice right here in this example that my web URL is NY Times. So I put it in italics. My publisher is the New York Times Online. A lot of students are like, aren't those the same thing? The answer is yes. But here's the thing. Anymore with modern marketing, someone creating a company is going to name their website the same name as their company. So of course the New York Times Online, their website's going to be NY Times. It makes sense. It's just a branding strategy. So a lot of times you may think, man, my web URL and my web publisher sound exactly the same. And that's okay. It's not always going to happen, which is why you have to list both. But if you're citing YouTube, for example, this is going to say YouTube in italics, and right beside it is going to be YouTube as your web publisher. So if it seems repetitive, that's okay. It's probably going to look like that, but that's just part of the format that we have to use. Then you do the date, and the date here we have the 30th of September 2014, and then I have a link copy and pasted for the website. So if you're wondering how to do dates in MLA, we do it kind of like a military style. We do the day first, and then the month, and then the year. If your month has more than 4 letters, you should abbreviate it. So like I have 14 May 2014. I don't need to abbreviate anything. But if I have 24 Sept for September 2014, I've abbreviated that. Also, for the NY Times part that was italicized in the last slide, you only put the full link at the end of the citation. Okay. Now, the last one I want to go over is journals. Journals are hard because they do have a lot of parts to them. But if you just follow this formula on this slide, you'll be fine citing journals. So it starts out the exact same way. We still have our author last name, author first name. So my example down here, I have Jane Doe. So I have Doe, comma, Jane. I have my article title in quotation marks. So Pavlov's theory in quotation marks. I have my journal title in italics. So the American Psychological Journal. Here's where journals are different. After my journal title in italics, I put the volume number and then the issue number. So volume, vol.14, issue 5. Then I have the year published, 2014, and then the pages, pp, or pages 34 to 56. That's all I need. So there's a little bit more information there, but you just organize it in that format and you'll be fine. You don't need anything else. It's all you need for a journal. If you have questions, luckily you have a lot of resources at your disposal. So for one thing, the Cengage handbook that you have, there's that little handout, and that little handout has tons of examples on how to cite an MLA. It gives you examples of when things have 2 authors, when things have 4 authors, when things have no authors, when they're books, when they're websites, when they're emails. That little handout in your Cengage handbook has so many examples. It's an extremely valuable resource. You also have this presentation that you can always refer back to. And finally, you have the website Purdue OWL. And Purdue OWL, I'm going to click on it here. Purdue OWL is funded by Purdue University and their English department, which is pretty awesome. And their English department updates it constantly. So they have a YouTube channel, they have a vidcast series, and they also, if you go down here to the left, you can see that they have a style guide to show you basics, how to cite journals, common sources, electronic sources. There's a lot here to go to. My personal favorite source to cite an electronic, I'll pull it up. You scroll down here. You can cite a website, page, an ebook, an image, an article, a scholarly journal, an email. It shows you how to cite an email, a blog. My favorite is the tweet. If you look below my little bubble here, you just have the handle, the entire tweet, and then Twitter in italics, the date, the time that you tweeted, and then a link to the tweet. I think it's adorable. I love when people cite tweets. I think it's cute. But yeah, and then it also shows you below that how to cite a YouTube video. It just has lots of examples that will cater to whatever source you're looking for. And I'm not picky on what type of sources you use in your papers, as long as they're credible. That's my main thing. You can use as many videos, tweets, interviews, whatever you want, as long as they're a credible source. I'm okay with that. All right. So, getting back to this, that's basically it about MLA. As always, if you have questions, if something's just not making sense, you can always email me and ask about parts of the video that you want me to explain in more detail. I'm totally fine with that. I'm happy to help explain anything, but there's a lot of resources you have available that you can look through, and then if you get questions after reading those, please feel free to send them my way. MLA is very much a practiced art, and my biggest piece of advice is just to practice with assignments, with our papers, with our drafts. just practice citing, and we're going to have assignments through the rest of the semester where you will get to practice. So just do that, and I think that's probably going to help you more than anything. But I will have the week 9 video out soon by this weekend. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to refer back to it. And as always, you can ask me any more questions when you get them. But in the meantime, I'll talk to you all later. Have a great weekend.